Hello, my name's Tim Fisher. Today I'm going to do a palette knife painting. It uses the superb Sennelier abstract acrylics. These are unique because they're packaged in a lovely pouch. They have tremendous viscosity and flow, which make them ideally suitable for working with palette knives. The knives I'm going to be using these three knives from the extended range of Sennelier palette knives, where they provide a whole choice of different shapes and sizes. I'm going to start the painting on a canvas board, which I've tinted very lightly with yellow ochre and cadmium red hue. I'm going to start the painting by doing an ink drawing. I've got a dip pen and I've got some La Pagode Sennelier Indian ink. So let's get started and see how we get on. Okay, so I'm starting the drawing now with the Indian ink. I like to use a steel dip pen because you can get a far more expressive mark with a steel nib than you can with what I would say is the traditional fibre tip pen. The only disadvantage you tend to get with one of these is you get a little bit of blotting, which you can either wait for it to dry, or you must make sure that you dab it with a clean tissue before proceeding with the rest of the painting. But the reason I do an ink pen drawing, even when I'm going to cover it up with a palette knife, is it gives me a little bit of a guidance as to where I can place the paint, especially when it comes to adding the sky. Basically, I block in, so I will block in the sky area, and I don't want to overlap too much where the trees are, because then you're in the situation where you're having to layer more acrylic over wet paint. I mean, when you're working with palette knives and acrylics, these lovely abstract acrylics, they will allow you to overpaint over wet paint, but I often think it's easier to just block in and just take advantage of the spaces provided by the coloured background. So there we have the subject just basically blocked in or drawn in. I'm now going to give it a dab with a tissue just to take out those areas where it's not going to dry as quickly as I want it to. So the next step now is to start adding acrylic paint. I'm just going to take that away. I've got a nice big disposable palette here. When you're working with palette knives, it's important to work on a flat surface so that you can easily mix your colours and manipulate the paints. I'm going to use this Sennelier 1000 knife. It's got quite a unique shape because normally these knives have two flats on these two sides, but this one's got a third one on this edge, so it does actually give you three blade widths with which to work. I'm going to use the broad blade, and I can very quickly put a sky in. I'm going to use Sennelier Azure Blue. This is another one I've found. This is a lovely colour. This is quinacridone pink. I use this quite a lot in different sorts of paintings, and it is a very useful colour to have. Titanium white, a lovely dense white, mixed in with other colours. This provides great coverage. So what I'm basically going to do now is take the Azure Blue and mix in some white. Palette knives don't mix paint as thoroughly as if you're mixing with a brush. So you can see there we've got striations or stripes of different colour, but this is actually an advantage when you're painting skies because the colours will split out as you apply the colour over the surface. And as you can see, you can apply colour quite quickly. I'm going to add more white now so that we get a gradation of tone. So it should get a little bit lighter as it approaches the horizon. And we're getting these lovely horizontal streaks of white which indicate the cloud base, the distant cloud. So I'm mixing a little bit of the quinacridone pink now as we approach the horizon and a bit more white. And we're going to carry on working down towards the horizon. Traditionally, palette knives have been used for many years by oil painters, probably going back as far as Rembrandt, where these oil painters have picked up paint off the palette that they normally use a knife for mixing the colour, but they've found if they pick the paint up on the knife, they can get some really interesting marks and effects when they apply paint to the painting surface. This particular surface is a canvas board, so it's got a texture which will allow me to get all sorts of different effects from it. Moving on, artists these days tend to combine palette knives with acrylics. It's a much more efficient way of applying paint. So I'm going to squeeze out some cadmium orange and a little bit of burnt sienna. This is for the roof of the barn. A little bit, these barns in this Suffolk area, the sides are usually painted black. So we've got some Mars black there as well. When it comes to painting buildings, it does require a little bit more precision. So I'm going to change to this Sennelier 1001, which is a little tiny palette knife, which is excellent for applying paint in these slightly more detailed parts of the painting. It's a good discipline to, if you want to get good at using palette knives, to actually practice filling in small shapes and patterns. You could draw small little squares or circles and then practice applying paint to these different shapes. I mean, it's not always successful to fill in these shapes, but you'll sometimes find the paint that goes over the edges can be covered up later in the painting. You'll notice I'm doing the building before I've even painted around the building. And that way I can compensate for any mistakes I might make at this stage in the painting. So I'm just going here with a lighter orange I've just added a little bit of white to the orange. The other thing you have to be aware of when you're painting with knives is which side you put the paint. Paint is usually applied in a thin strip, and depending on which way you're working, you have to think about where you're applying that paint. So we'll go on to the black now, Mars Black. A lovely dense black. I use black a lot when I'm working with acrylics. I find it's a very flexible and versatile pigment to use when you're adding it to other colours. For example, black and primary yellow mixed together make an excellent dark green, and later on I'll be using that combination to paint the trees in this subject. So that's the sides of the barn done. Just a little bit of white into that black to make a grey. Because we're going to have the light travelling in from this side of the painting. So we want to make these edges facing the light a little bit paler in colour. So I've gone over the edges in places there, but it doesn't really matter because we can compensate for that when we start to do the stuff around it. A little tiny sliver of black just under the eaves of the building. And now we'll start painting the surrounding trees. I'm going to change knives again. I'm going to go onto this oval knife. This is an egg-shaped knife. It's the 1011 Sennelier painting knife. This is a knife I literally grew up with. I've used this shape for many years, and I find it's an incredibly versatile shape to use. So I'm going to squeeze out some violet, because basically what we want to do, we want to build some aerial perspective into this painting. So literally things that recede into the distance are going to lose the colour and become greyer and more of a violet colour. So the first set of distant trees I'm going to do are going to be a sort of violet. So I'm mixing the violet into the previous colour that I mixed to the walls of the barn. And I'm going to start. This is cutting in, so I'm literally going to cut right up against the edge of the barn, and you get a lovely sharp edge by doing this. It does take a little bit of concentration, but once you've got that in, you can relax a little bit and enjoy a bit of expressive freedom with your painting. I'll put a little bit more dark in there. Just a little bit too pale. So now I'm just going to sweep the colours outwards away from that tree shade, and what's going to happen, it's going to hit the wet paint of the sky, and we're going to get a little bit of mixing in there, so you get a lovely soft edge. So you're going to get this nice effect with the trees. See, I get that lovely broken edge. So I'm going to work my way all the way along the barn now. We've got a tricky corner here, so I'm going to swap to the small knife. And carry on. Go a little bit higher with that one. It's probably best not to try too hard when you're painting trees, but just go with the marks that the knife gives you. Drawing with a knife can be quite challenging, so you know, we'd sometimes have to settle for a slightly more looser effect or a slightly more abstract effect. So I think that's probably as far as I'm going to go with the distant trees. It's time now to put in trees a little bit closer. So I'm going to squeeze out some primary yellow. And a little bit of yellow ochre. Because basically you don't want all your trees to be the same shade of green. So these distant trees are going to be a bit more of an olivey green. So I've made that by using the primary yellow, the yellow ochre and the black. And now we can pop that and literally just let that slide over the trees we've already painted. I'm going to put a little bit of paler colour. We've still got to remember where the light's coming from, so a little bit of paler colour on that side, and we'll have another tree in this corner. Right, moving on to the next part, I'm going to start with just primary yellow and the small knife, and I'm going to bring in a yellow where the edges of the trees or bushes start, and this just acts as a means of catching the light in the distance. So I'm just going to dab on some colour across here. And then I'm going to mix a green, because there's a distant hedgerow and bushes along this area, so I'm going to just quickly blot that in. Doesn't matter if you end up with a few unmixed colours on your knife, this all adds to the interest of the painting. Right, it's starting to come on now. There's a little bit of green in there. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to apply a rape field to this side. You get these fields in the English countryside in the late spring, and they're a glorious yellow, and I think in a painting it always adds a little bit to the work. Now I'm using the big knife again, and the long blade is perfect for getting a lovely straight edge. So I'm going to pull that down, and then later on I'm going to apply the hedgerow on this right hand side. So I'm just thinking ahead a little bit about what I apply where. So the next stage is to add the trees which are on this left hand side, all these tree shapes here. That's the next stage in the painting. So plenty of cadmium yellow and Mars black. As I said earlier on, black and yellow make a lovely green. Just spending a little bit longer mixing these, and so far I've done the painting sitting down. I'm going to stand up to do this bit. I've indicated the trunk of a tree here, so we'll paint around that. This is one of the advantages of having an underpainting, that you can leave areas of the board exposed and it still forms part of the painting because you've got this tint of colour underneath. So now I'm going to bring these fronds from the conifer that's in the background out into the sky area. And what I'm doing here, I'm just got a little bit of paint on the edge of the knife and I'm just pushing it upwards. So with these big knives you can work quickly and you can cover quite a bit of ground. I'm going to use the egg-shaped knife now just to add just a little bit more information onto the edges of those trees. That's great. The next step now is this foliage is layered, so we need some foliage on top of that foliage. So I'm going to mix primary yellow and French ultramarine blue. And a little bit of white to make a paler green. You've got to be careful when you apply white into your colour mix because it can make the yellows go a bit chalky. But the advantage of adding it is that it does make your greens very opaque. So what you can do then is literally slide them over the top of what you've already painted. Just slide them over the wet paint. So just to finish off this area, I'm going back to the sky mix I had earlier on, and I'm just going to add a few little marks into that painted area. These are called buttons, where you just put a little blob of colour on the surface, and that will represent the sky holes in the tree. So I'm going to work on the trunk next. Thin sliver of paint down the knife and literally just pull that down the side. While that paint's still wet, I'm going to just pull out some branch shapes. And then back to applying the colours on the trunk. Using yellow ochre here, I'm now adding a little bit of burnt sienna. And then finally just a little bit of violet or purple. There we have the trunk shapes. Right, the next stage is to get that roadway in. Again, I'm using the large knife, yellow ochre and plenty of white. I've got a bit of dark paint on my knife, so I'm just mixing that into that set of colours I've already got. So this is just applying the colour to the lane that recedes into the distance. As I come into the foreground, I'm just going to add a little bit of burnt sienna just to darken the lane slightly. I'm using directional strokes. So I'm pulling the strokes in the direction I would expect the road to go in, and this just helps the marks to follow that shape. Right, the next stage now is to tackle the left hand side, all the foliage. So I'm going to start randomly mixing a few different colours and adding those onto the surface. So ultramarine blue, primary yellow, just to make an initial green colour. You're better, if you can, to change the tone or darkness or lightness of your colour mix as much as possible, because then you'll get these overlapping colours which will actually stand out. If you mix colours that are too close to the previous colour, then you're not really going to get the benefit of that. So when I use these egg-shaped knives, I tend to just slide them uphill slightly, and this will create all sorts of interesting shapes. Got a little bit of violet there, just push a bit of that in. This is a good way of using up all the colours that you've got mixed on your palette. Yellow, ochre and white now. I'm going to put a little bit of primary yellow into that mixture as well, and we get these lovely almost like dried grass. If you can, periodically when you're doing this, is introduce a darker colour. I'm using the purple or the violet. You get some lovely textural effects going on. And then we want quite a strong dark in the foreground, because I'm going to have some shadows going across the roadway, and these shadows are also going to go across this grassy bank. So I want to get the foreground textures quite dark, and we'll put lots of dark colours in there. I'm adding black and purple and violet just to create a shadow. And And using the same colour, I'm going to create a shadow here that's cast by that tree. So we just need to add the centre line down the lane. There's often with these country lanes you get a little bit of grass down the middle where the vehicles haven't driven over the entire surface. So just bring that down. Not forgetting to make the colour a little bit wider, and I'm making it a little bit darker as we get towards the end of the lane. Just make that a little bit wider. There. Okay, we're on the home run now. So I've squeezed out primary yellow, French ultramarine blue, Mars black and yellow ochre. And I'm going to tackle the hedge on the right hand side. So hopefully the rape field has had time to dry while we've been painting the rest of the painting. So we should hopefully be able to just scumble the paint over the yellow. So scumbling is where you just allow wet paint to rub over dry paint, and the texture of the surface gives you these lovely broken marks. So just a little bit of black for the hedge bottom. So you can work quite quickly with almost any size of knife. It doesn't matter. One of the things I enjoy doing is sgraffito. This is just taking out little bits of the wet paint and just suggesting twigs and sticks and things like that. We're really on the home run now, so it's just a matter of doing the important bits, which are really the shadows. So I've got the violet out here, and I'm going to mix in with that just a few other colours: French ultramarine blue, primary yellow, and yellow ochre. So we've got this sort of purpley grey colour, and we want these colours to just spread across the road. And up and over the hump, and then just spread over the other side, and then this big shadow in the foreground. I like big foreground shadows because they force the eye further into the painting. The other thing I like to do when I'm adding shadows is to leave little areas of light just shining through the shadow, because I think that always works extremely well too. And finally we want a shadow on this step roof of the barn. So I'm just going to go in there with the tiny knife. Just put a little sloping shadow roof of the barn. The last thing to do now is to do what I call the fluid work. The viscosity of the Sennelier Abstract acrylics are absolutely perfect for doing this type of painting, but when you want to do precision marks and dots and spatter, you have to just change the viscosity of the paint. And what I tend to like, I like to use this brilliant bright fluid medium by Sennelier. I put some of this into this little dispenser, and when you add this to the colour, it dilutes it down and makes it much more fluid, and it allows for some more interesting marks. So I'm just adding a little pile of Mars Black and Violet and a little bit of the fluid medium. If you want to get your paint even runnier, you can add a little bit of water to it as well. And I find if you add water, you can actually spatter with a palette knife, because you can pick the stuff off and just shake it and it will drop off onto the surface. So now we've got that quite fluid, I'm going to put a little tiny sliver of paint on the edge of the knife, and we'll just put some little fence posts just going down the road, and a little telegraph pole sticking up at the end. You see, you actually get perspective just by making as you put the same mark down, it gets lighter and lighter and lighter as it recedes into the distance. We've put a little bit of wire running along the top of the fence as well. And you can do the same if you want to add flowers or anything in the hedgerow. You can literally have the same approach. You have a choice here. You can either make it fluid, or you can actually pick the paint up on the tip of the brush. If you pick it up like that, that's called a button, and we can literally just touch that onto the surface. You have to get it fairly random so that it looks natural, and we'll put that on both sides. I'm not sure if poppies are in season the same time as rape fields, but hey ho, we'll take a chance on that. If we take the azure blue and add some fluid to that, dilute it down. We can add a little bit of water to that. I've got a little syringe here, and we can add water to that to make it even more fluid. And we should be able to spatter. If it goes over your glasses, you're doing it wrong. But there you have, in a nutshell, a whole host of different types of knife techniques that you can achieve just using these three knife shapes and these Sennelier Abstract acrylics. I would thoroughly recommend these, as they make painting an absolute pleasure. Compared with other products on the market, these are very competitively priced. So it gives you a lot of freedom in the sense that you can experiment with these and play with these, and you're not investing in a huge amount of money to do that. So I hope you've enjoyed this demonstration, and thank you very much for watching.